What's up, y'all? Welcome to Recess.
I'm Cash.
I'm Wachekia.
I'm Micah.
I'm Awate.
I'm Giassi. We're here with Creative Justice and Converge Media. We're going to be talking to you about Seattle artists, youth issues, and many more topics. Stay tuned.
Good morning, good evening, and good night, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Recess. I'm here with the lovely Miss Ashe. She was a teacher at Federal Way High School, one of the schools I went to. I adore her very much, and we're going to be talking about civil rights. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Awate. Thank you for asking. You look great.
Thank you.
College is looking good on you. So yeah,
Thank
congrats.
you. We're going to get started with the first question.
Okay.
Do you think us as a nation or even the world are progressing?
Progressing. Well, I guess that would depend on the context. So in technology, yeah, we're progressing in science and medicine, those fields. Can you be more specific? Like progressing in what area?
Probably when we're talking about for example, civil rights or like politics,
social justice, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I kind of feel we're like at a standstill. Being my age, I remember an era where there seemed to be a lot of impetus to move forward, to progress, to change policies and conditions that were oppressive and, harmful to certain populations. And I feel like in some cases we're at a standstill, and in other cases we're even moving backwards in some regards. So I wouldn't say that I personally feel that in those areas, social justice, civil rights, they were really progressing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was gonna say it's kind of like because I remember a lot of times in like BSU, you would talk about like how sometimes it felt like we would take one step forward but two steps back.
Exactly.
Because it was like Roe v. Wade got overturned, and that's just like, it's not even like two steps back, it's like we're taking a whole mile back. And it's just like we're reversing, especially now because we're talking about like just basic human rights, healthcare rights and stuff like that is being stripped away from people. And it's like now it kind of feels like a lot of politicians don't even look at like who they're representing as people. They just look at them as numbers. Because it's like a lot of the times it's just like, I don't know, I feel like for me as like a woman, it's kind of scary because it's just like in 2 or 3 years from now I might not be having the same rights as I did,
as your grandmother did.
Yeah.
And I don't think politicians and our leaders really fail to look at us as people, but I believe that we're so caught up in distractions in the political process that oftentimes the best interest of human beings, particularly marginalized populations and underserved, underrepresented populations, often just don't factor into the equation because other things are more prioritized. Yeah.
Okay, for the next question is, what changes do you wish the next generation can do?
By next generation, are you referring to your generation? Yeah. I am very disheartened by the level of apathy. You guys is it Gen Z? Is that who you guys are? Yeah, it's my Gen Zers. In fact, you may have seen some of my posts on Facebook directed to my Gen Zers. And I just feel that they've given up hope. And they've sort of stepped into this atmosphere of like complacency. Even my own grandsons, we have conversations all the time, for example, about the upcoming election. And some of their comments are really disheartening, even kind of scary. Like, for example, my middle grandson was like, well, I'm just not even going to vote for anybody because I don't like either one of them and they don't really care about us anyway. We don't really benefit one way or the other, no matter who's running, who's in the government. And I'm not sure where that attitude came from, but it's kind of scary. So I work really hard to change that but it's going to take a voice from within your generation because, you know, I'm just grandma, the old lady, like they even called me grandma at school, you know that. And so oftentimes my perspective is looked at kind of like with a side eye by the younger people. And so that is most concerning to me, the degree of apathy, complacency, we don't really care, we don't think our voice matters, that sort of thing. Which is why, well, you know, for example, the voter registration drive we had last year. How many kids showed up? Like 8, maybe. Yeah. And we're trying it again this year, next week on Tuesday and Thursday. We're trying that again because all 16, 17, and 18-year-olds can register, as you know. So hopefully we'll get a bigger turnout this year. We'll just see.
Because I know for my school at UW Seattle right now, they're trying to get more people to register to vote. I think they said that they're part of this one like huge program where like I think they're like surveying to see like what percentage of people are voting, and it's like every single election it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So now they've done like little fun activities like during our Black to School event. You could like get a free sticker or you can get like a little treat if you showed proof that you registered to vote. And it was like, even though a lot of people are like, oh, I don't think, you know, I want to vote and stuff like that. It's just like, I don't think they understand that, you know, like their voice matters because it's like at the end of the day, it's your rights as well.
And one of the biggest obstacles and one of the things that bothers me the most is that so many young people are stuck on this one issue. So they have issues with one issue from, you know, a candidate, and then they've just decided to dismiss everything else because they have a problem with one issue. For example, with Kamala Harris, a lot of young Black and brown men are bothered by her history as AG in the state of California. You know, I've heard young Black and brown men say, well, she sent, you know, a ton of brothers to prison for like really minor stuff. And so they're picking up, you know, media stuff rather than doing their own research to really know what her career was like and the things that she achieved during that time. So it's laziness too. So I said complacency and apathy, but throw in a dose of laziness, and that's a real recipe for destruction because they don't want to do the work to educate themselves about what the real issues are and why they matter in our community.
Going on to the next question. Was there anyone in your life that impacted you to be so vocal about your rights?
About my rights? Yes. So on one side, I have immigrant grandparents. On the other side, I had grandparents who grew up in the South at the turn of the century. And so both sides faced huge obstacles. And I heard a lot about the struggles, and I got a lot of messages about responsibility and mine and my siblings' responsibility to realize that the privileges that were afforded us were because of the sacrifices and the pain that our predecessors had experienced, and that we were always made aware of the responsibility to not take our duty, for example, to vote or to become engaged in community activism or service. That was instilled in us at an early age that these things are not privileges, they're responsibilities, they're duties that you can't shirk, because if you do, that's like slapping your grandparents and great-grandparents in the face. So I think it was my grandparents that were the strongest influence.
I like to say, because your grandparents taught you how to be so vocal about your rights, that you've also like taught a lot of people during BSU how to be so vocal. Because I feel like not only just me, but it's like now a lot of us that were in BSU, not even just BSU, but Latinx, are also like being very vocal about like our rights and stuff like that, especially because it's like now a lot of us are at UW and like we're holding bigger positions and stuff like that. So,
well, great. That makes me proud.
Your parents have met Rosa Parks. Did it open a different perspective for you? And what perspective do you wish others had?
It did. It did, because this was a woman who was courageous and willing to sacrifice even, her own safety. And as I mentioned before, I feel that attribute is kind of lacking in your generation. And I think it's maybe an unreasonable expectation for people to like go out there and physically put themselves on the line, but we really don't have to do that anymore. There are very safe and even private ways, like voting, for example, where we can behave like activists and stand up for what we know is important and not really be threatened. I mean, we can take it further if we like and take to the streets and in open protest or whatever. But the point is, that was one of the few options that my grandparents and even my parents had. My parents from the South were not allowed to vote until they moved to California in the 40s. And then there was still difficulty for them in terms of their voting rights, not because it was illegal in California, but because it was dangerous. If you get what I mean, like, who are you? Who do you think you are? Trying to exercise a right that we feel is ours alone. So, yeah, I think more young people need to understand that nobody's asking you to stand up or sit down like Rosa Parks did, but to just at least speak your mind, join organizations, show up. You don't even have to show up at the polls. Your ballot comes to your house in the mail. Open it up and fill it out and think, research before you make decisions. So I think if I could stress that one thing, that's what I would try to communicate to students today. Yeah.
There's a quote by MLK that says, "We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." What does that mean to you, and the importance of it?
Well, he took that quote from scripture, and it's a reference to, the hardships and the persecution that the Israelites endured, and some of the same philosophies apply to all people who suffer injustice and persecution. So, yeah, it's a powerful quote. We won't be satisfied, except going back again to my earlier statement about young people today. They seem to be just satisfied. I got a job, I got a car, I got my Xbox, I got food, and I'm just going to enclose myself in my own safe little bubble until the proverbial what hits the fan. And that's what I think has happened to a lot of young women. So when I talk about the complacency and the laziness and the apathy, I'm seeing that most in Black and brown young men. And those are the ones who are voicing, for example, the complaint that I mentioned before about not being satisfied with a candidate because of one or two issues. They're taking that personally, and they're not looking outside of their own self-interest in terms of their responsibility to their community, to their people, to the country, really, in terms of making a decision about this election. So, did that answer your question? I tend to rant, you know that. So I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, hopefully that answered the question.
And our final question is, what do you think do you think the meaning of equality has improved?
The meaning of equality? Well, I don't think the definition has changed. I mean, equality is equality and inequality is inequality. So if your question is really about whether or not I think we've moved closer to that, well, yeah, if you go back, like I mentioned, to the turn of the century when my grandparents were growing up in Louisiana on my mother's side, and when my paternal grandparents were children in a Central American country that was impoverished, then yeah, the concept of equality hasn't changed, but the action directed towards achieving equality for everyone, I think, is it looks different. It's more intentional and purposeful now. And people know their right to equality. People know that as human beings, as citizens, not only of this country, but of the planet, we all have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So I think that attitude has grown and has become more vocal and more active, but equality's always meant the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's all the questions I have for Miss Ashe. Just want to say thank you to Miss Ashe for coming down and letting me interview you. Miss Ashe has been an important figure in my life from when I was a freshman, not even a freshman, I think 8th grader, till now. And not just from what Miss Ashe has said, but don't forget to also research and do your own personal research on who you want to vote for, because voting is a fundamental right. And
a duty.
And a duty. Yeah. And just like that, we're going to end the episode. And good morning, good evening, and good night to wherever you are in the world. Don't forget to register to vote. It's about your rights, and your voice deserves to be heard. Peace out, guys.